Hey, bro, have you actually seen that Korean baseball league?
Bro, that league's insane. All they do is they just cock back and then sports is back, Champ Nation. We are so happy to hear the new news in all the different leagues and sports that here in the next 2 weeks to a month, we may seemingly have sports, live sports, everything sports, and we are happy.
I am very happy that sports is finally back, even though it's some crazy Korean baseball organization. It's still some fun stuff, and you know what? There's maybe even some better sports opening up soon. So
Honestly, even though we haven't had any sports, the Korean Baseball League has been entertaining. It's kept everybody up at 2 a.m., getting new teams, seeing a new type of league, a new type of baseball. I mean, they even tried to make it real by putting sound effects and even paper fans in the stands to make it seem more realistic. So, as we said earlier, leagues are coming back. This weekend, the UFC, Fight Island, is putting on their event. NASCAR is coming back. We've seen new leagues starting to drop new proposals. Reported by Jeff Passan of ESPN, the MLB should have their proposal done by the end of the week and put into the office to see whether they can start a new spring training here in early June and maybe get this season started right away. We're seeing that Bundesliga is starting here in the next week, and the NFL schedule is coming out as planned. So we look like we're getting some sports here.
right now, it looks like everybody's trying to work with the government as best as they can and get some sort of schedule or proposal just in check if they're not necessarily halfway through their season, just to get restarted again. They really want to make sure that everybody's safe in regards to the team and the trainers and the coaches that are actually on the team, not necessarily the fans. We all know it's going to be a long time until we see fans in the stands again. But I do want to ask you about something that you mentioned before about the MLB. I heard in there that you said that they'd be doing spring training again if they could. They definitely have already had some spring training. Why would they need to do it again?
So baseball is kind of not like the other sports. You can't just go right back in. Generally, you got to give pitchers and hitters times to readjust. So realistically speaking, a lot of these pitchers probably haven't been able to throw at home in their normal bullpens to get their arms ready for that 162-game season. Whether or not we have 162 games is a different topic to talk about. But I think you got to give teams at least a week or two to get back together, start working on the fundamentals, get them fresh and ready to go. Let pitchers and hitters see some live play. Maybe have a series, like a rivalry series. So the Angels and the Dodgers could play, right? The Rockies and the Diamondbacks could play. Yankees and Mets. I mean, teams that are close together where they could get some live baseball into practice, and then we just go straight into the season. Whether that be 162 games and we go deep into the winter, or we shorten it and we just play with what we got.
With 162 games, I feel like they definitely have some options in regards to potentially shortening the season. They could keep it as just as long and go deep into winter, like you said, but there are going to be some potential negative ramifications because of that. So just got to make sure they take everything into account.
Even if they go deep into the winter, say November, December, because we've now missed a month of the season, baseball is a super long off season, so I think in the end it would be okay. But like you said, there could be some ramifications on both ends of positive, negative things that could happen and come from this. You did more research on Bundesliga, though. They are starting here, I think I read correctly, May 16th. You have more on that, though.
Yeah, per the Bundesliga officials and a couple other team officials that have come out and spoken publicly, they've wanted to get back for a little while now. They want to be the first European football franchise to go back on the map, back into their season. They're close to being done actually with their season, with most teams having 9 to 10 games left. But they would only be active for about a month and a half. Their season would end in late June. So a May to late June ending with protocols that would definitely suffice for keeping the players, trainers, and coaches all safe would be easier than, say, having a couple months long campaign with only 6 months, 6 to 7 weeks on their schedule left. Perhaps it makes it a little bit easier.
And let's make one thing clear. With sports coming back, there will be no fans. We won't see that for a while, and I think, relatively speaking, that is a great idea. Whether the athletes are happy about that or not, I hate to say it, but who cares? We pay them millions of dollars. They need to go out there and do what they're paid to do and play if they want to play that bad. With that being said, though, teams, a happy note, a positive note, I think it'll make them feel more comfortable. I think their families will be happier. Teams will seemingly play in their home stadiums and arenas. It'll bring a normalcy. I think they'll still be allowed to see their families. The quarantine protocols may change and could be the one thing about this that we really are unsure of. One other thing that I did see yesterday that I think is one of the most interesting topics I've seen since coronavirus started. James Franklin, the Penn State head coach, said no matter what, if they can start the season whether or not each team has all their team, or each league, has all their teams eligible to play. How do we feel about that?
Man, that is kind of a weird situation to be in. The only other situation I could see it is if multiple teams or multiple franchises or schools were tragically killed in some way. This is a very unique situation that'll probably never happen again in our lifetimes. That being said, historically, if you only have 50% of the league playing and you win a national championship, who's really going to recognize that? What is that season going to be? What is the goal of that season, if you do have it, where there's not even any fans, it's limited television as well. It would be big television, but there's not as many games, so you have limited matchups to see. Where was the point of having a season? That's the question I ask.
The problem with this is that each state, county, city has its own ordinance. So here in LA, we could have one set, and in Minnesota they could have another set, in Michigan they could have another set, in Arizona they could have another set. So you could have states where colleges are allowed to play their sports, but other states where people can't even go outside. So that's kind of the issue that I think we're facing here, why he's like, well, why can't we just play? And if that's the case, then guess what? You're probably making one giant Division I league, and whoever ends up on top, somehow you have to schedule that. Now becomes your winner, and do we put an asterisk next to the name of that player or that team that wins? I do, because what happens if Alabama or Clemson can't play? You sure know that one of them was probably going to end up in the national championship. So,
yeah, I think it would take almost just as much time to put something together like that than it would be just to wait until everything's settled enough to.
And they've expressed that if worst case scenario, they could wait till December, play the season until June, and possibly ask the NFL to move the draft if that was the issue with players being drafted in April and not being able to finish out their season. I'm sure that we could figure out a scenario in that situation where everybody has an equal chance of play, and we also have a better grasp on what we can and can't do in regards to coronavirus.
All right, with sports back and everything sort of returning to normal, at least in regards to sports being conducted, there are always controversies to be had within the sporting realm. One of which we have talked off camera quite a bit, you and I, has been about referees. Referees seem to have gotten a lot of attention increasingly over the past few years, especially in the NFL and NBA. What are your thoughts about some of the more controversial referee opinions nowadays and how they seem to be going?
So I think you and I both, we've watched sports for probably 20 years now and seen the game evolve, whether it's physicality, technology, rule changes, all the above, the type of player, so be it. I think we're now at a point where refereeing is at its worst. And someone will be like, how is that even possible? You have technology, they can get every call right. See, that's where you're wrong. Because regardless of the technology, umpires are still getting calls wrong. They're getting super angry about people challenging them. and they have the shortest fuse probably ever and are just ejecting people left and right. Players, coaches, media, owners, anybody, not even allowed to say anything without getting punished. And I think that that's absolutely wrong, because if an umpire went at someone else, they would never get wrong. I saw a video today, actually, of Chase Headley. He's a former New York Yankee third baseman. He had been hit by a pitch and they missed the call. They claimed that he swung or bunted. And it settled down. He was getting back into the box, didn't say a word. The umpire said something to him. He said something back. And then the umpire kept going by pointing at him, making this big deal. And then the umpire ejected him. We are seeing more and more issues where umpires are antagonizing and instigating and not letting players react. It's a sport. Just as we say that the human element is a part of umpiring, if the human element is part of all of sports. If you're going to be an umpire and say, this is what I'm calling, you should be able to take criticism. Also, you should be able to man up and say, I got that wrong, if you see it in a video.
Now, it is kind of interesting when you mention a human element and then you kind of throw in that robotic analysis in there. There's obviously going to be some sort of difference when you have the two trying to work, cohesively. If you could choose between leaning more towards the human element or the robotic kind of analysis, analytical side, where they do everything from exact location of a pitch to where his foot was on the basketball court, which side would you want it to be more?
Human. It's always been that way. That's how we started it. That's what it is. I'm not against technology at all, but I think that these thought processes of we're going to have an electronic strike zone, we're going to tell the ump exactly what to call, and that's that. Yes, it would make the game fair, but then you're taking away the challenge of hitting, right? And I think in the NBA, we've seen where that the thing is this is why we have multiple umps and refs in a game. Realistically speaking, if you have 4 umpires, 3 umpires, 2 umpires, someone saw the play, right? So whether or not you don't know, man up, say, I don't know, I didn't see it, ask for help, right? But when you ask for help, don't be a complete ass about it when you're wrong, right? Because now you're challenging and giving the players consequences. If someone has an issue with your call, I understand you're protective about it, but explain to them why. Don't just be like, you're gone, and be like, you're not allowed to argue balls and strikes. You're not making the game better. You've now arguably probably taken out the best player on that team. Like, imagine us as Dodger fans. Last year, Cody Bellinger got ejected in the 8th inning of a 1-run game because on the electronic strike zone, they were balls, but they were called strikes. And he was like, the ball was this far off the plate, which, you know what, an umpire has his or her ability to call what they feel. But you got to let the other people question and say something if we're going to consider the human element.
It definitely seems nowadays a lot of people's issues with refereeing seems to be that they take every opportunity they can to insert themselves into a game, whether it be reviewing every certain close call or whether it be stopping the game for every call that seems to be iffy. They can't just make a judgment call. Really, though, the issue with them lies at the hand of them taking the opportunity and them not taking the opportunity. Do you think in the last 2 decades that umpires have said, look, I want to not necessarily put myself in the game, but I want to make sure that I make the correct call for the game rather than saying, hey, I just want to leave myself out of the game?
I'm not saying I necessarily believe in this, but all I'm going to say is there's conspiracy theories that referees have caused NBA championships to be won by certain teams, and I'll leave it at that. You can take that as you please. You can roast me. You can agree with me, but I'm going to leave it at that, and you can take that how you want.
All right, so an exciting week in sports being concluded tonight with the NFL schedule release. We'll touch a little bit on that on Sunday. Check out some of our other videos. We talk about lots of NFL, NBA analysis as well. Besides that, have a good rest of your day. We are out.
We will see you this weekend.